Dimp Digital presents Idle Game Chat.
Cool.
So Logan, some people are calling this Baldur's Gate Freegate. There is some controversy swirling around the FGL Championship and the Grand Prix, and it's all linked to Baldur's Gate 3. The debacle.
Yes,
So,
that Dimp group's been quiet, and then it all kicked off, didn't it?
It did, certainly. So I'll give a little bit of a background. We've got Baldur's Gate 3 on Adkins' Grand Prix team. We've got Baldur's Gate 3 on Parky's Championship team. Now, when Adkins picked that, because that's how it ended up on Parky's team, Baldur's Gate 3 already had an OpenCritic page with a score on it because it had gone into early access about 2 or 3 years ago, and people had reviewed it, and OpenCritic picked them up and put them into their page. So clearly at the time, he hadn't checked that.
Yeah.
He'd just seen it was coming out in 2023 and gone, well, I'll pick that. He hadn't done the due diligence that's normally required. Had that maintained as a thing, and we're sitting here now as the game's out for the public consumption, then that pick would have been invalidated because, as everyone knows, you cannot pick a game that's already got a score for obvious reasons because you know what the score is. It's like it defeats the whole purpose of picking a video game. What OpenCritic did, though, is about 6 weeks ago, because I was checking in on it just occasionally, because I thought maybe they'll add a new page and rename this one Early Access, which has happened before, in which case it's in the clear, because it's a brand new setting from ground zero. But what they did was something I'd not seen before. They scrubbed the original page clean of all the reviews and reset it as though they never existed, which in turn made the pick valid again. Now, he's trying to pass this off as some sort of genius, thing that he's done. But I'm almost certain he was trying to transfer it out and he forgot. And then thought, oh, bollocks, I've got to make sure I've got rid of that by the end of the year. But this could impact you. I mean, this looks like it's tracking. At the moment, there's no reviews. There are reviews out, and I will get into that shortly because it's a bit of an odd way in which they've done it. But this could end up being, in my opinion, one of the... I reckon it's going to be the second best scoring game of the year. That's my prediction out there, which could directly influence your game against Parky, because that's one of his games that is on there. And obviously for Adkins in the Grand Prix, who's already got a stunning average, but only has 2 games out, it's going to give him another leg up. Now, I did say there could be a formal protest lodged by other competitors. I've yet to receive that. Yeah. Are we going to get a verbal one now? Or are you saying this is all fair game? My only dispute is that he was claiming it was some sort of genius idea, because we basically laughed it out of the room when he first did it because it wasn't a valid pick.
There's no precedent.
No, there wasn't.
There was no precedent for them doing that.
They're trying to cover their asses now.
Yeah, it's not... Well, I mean, that's what he'll say. No doubt he'll replay some of this fucking clip to me as well, the bastard.
No context clips from Adkins.
Yeah, I know. But essentially, because I was like, it sort of come out of nowhere, and I was like, I knew Baldur's Gate 3 was coming along, but in my head, I'd just gone that, like, he scrubbed it out, and I assumed in my head both him and Parky had got rid of it, like, right. Because why would you keep it? But it looks like both of them have either intentionally or unintentionally held on to it, and it's lucked out. Like, maybe Parky was going, well, I'll see what happens, and maybe Adkins was doing the same as well, and you think, fair play, they're banking on another page coming up, but there's no precedent for that happening. And obviously Hall was outraged about what's happened to him as well, where he's not benefited from that. So I find it interesting that they've done this for Baldur's Gate. Like, it's not something they've done before. I actually think they should distinguish early access, or if it's beta or alpha, whatever it is, and it does get a review, they should distinguish that from
put some brackets on the title. Baldur's Gate 3 early access.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you think just distinguish the two.
because they do that with Switch games, some Switch ports that are significantly different for obvious reasons from the PlayStation, PC, or the Xbox port, they actually put Switch or Switch Edition in brackets. So that gets a separate page, a separate score, because typically it dumps the overall average because the quality of the port's not normally up to snuff. It's making huge compromise. I expect something like that to happen should Hogwarts Legacy finally get a Switch version. I would expect to see a Switch edition. But FIFA's normally a good example of that because they stripped out a lot of the features. It was called like a Legacy edition as well.
Yeah. But I think that's the right thing to do. So I actually don't, I don't disagree. The thing that I don't like about it
is Adkins' smugness.
Well, I never like the smugness from
Particularly
anyone,
when he's
to
not
be
on your
honest. Yeah. But what I do think is that I fundamentally think in future years that if there is any indicative score available for a game, it should be null and void. Because, so hear me out. So if there's an early access score out, right, and it's a 97, that gives you a view into how the critics see the game. Now, there is an argument that can and would change, but I don't like the fact that you can view and get an insight. It feels like unsporting conduct more than anything in terms of it just doesn't feel right. Like there should be a blank slate. There should be no critical insight into how that game is going to do before you pick it. Now, this rule wasn't in place for this year, so it's difficult to apply that retrospectively. But I do think there should be a rule in future years that if there is a page where that game's in early access, or if there's any indicative score as to how that game might do when it comes to full release, it should be an insta transfer. Like if you pick that, it's a null and void game. Because I think I don't think it's right. I think you should be picking games that you've got no real critical insight into how they're going to do.
It's an interesting point, and I hear you. My only question would be is a preview. So we see previews of games before they're out, sometimes a year before they're out, and you can read that and they'll say this is shaping up to be best game of the year. Would that? I know it's not a score necessarily, but a verbal kind of check in the box saying this is going to be the bollocks. Surely has to.
No. So that's research, right? But if there is a page, and we'd have to be very clear about this. If there is a page on there, and it is part of a beta, alpha, demo, and it is reviewed and scored, like that, I think is where you'd have to draw the line.
Yeah.
Like if there is an outlet where they do a write-up about it and they say 8 out of 10, but it doesn't get uploaded onto OpenCritic as a Metascore, and there's no page for it, it's fair game.
Right.
But I think I don't like the fact that there was a page for this. There was an indicative score, albeit I don't think it was very good.
It's 71. It's going to be like 20 points higher than that. So it wasn't even a good guide in this case.
So, I'm not saying that it's led him to this point. But what I do think is he's trying to plug that hole in future.
Drink and drugs has led him to this point, and he's lucked out. Even the degenerates get lucky sometimes. I've seen it. I've seen him win the lottery.
Well, I mean, he's absolutely lucked out, and he's smug about it, and he should be too. Like, I think I would be smug about it.
Like that bloke who won the lottery and then bought loads of like monster trucks in his back garden or whatever he did, pissed it all away in like 5 years.
He won, but it's annoying because there was no precedent for this.
No,
like, you just assume you just get bolted in or bundled in or whatever would happen.
Yeah, and for those that say you should have thought about this. I watch F1 every week. There's still scenarios that pop up that haven't happened before in that, and it's been running 60 years. So they still have instances with weather and crashes and certain things. And like, there is no precedent for this, so we're just going to have to go with what logically makes sense in the moment, and then the next year they come along and say, right, that because that happened, you can't do it anymore, that loophole's shut, or that particular scenario we do X rather than Y.
It's what makes it interesting though, actually, is that scenarios do crop up and there are unexpected things that happen that change the dynamic, which is why I'm always like, things are looking good, but there's always a but in this game, and I've been bloody on the receiving end of it so many times that I never rule it out. So, what can you say? You got to say, fair play, it's worked out, but it's definitely more luck than. I mean, say more luck than judgment. I think there was this, clearly they were banking on the fact that it would get its own page because it was expected to review well. I think everyone acknowledged that.
Yeah.
So you could argue that they banked on that and it's worked. So as a strategy, you can say there's an element, a 5% element of strategy in it, but it's
not a lot.
In terms of the years that we've been doing this and where there's a precedent, there is literally no precedent for this, and it's a completely unexpected performance, if you like, from OpenCritic, considering Hall's been lobbying for a new
he's been emailing them to try and get Persona 4 Golden added as a new version. I think for PC, I think it came out earlier this year, and they didn't do it. And they have done it in the past with other games. That's the thing with OpenCritic. There is no consistency. They're a little bit like they wake up on one side of the bed and do X. The next day they're like, nah, I think we'll do this. So
it's like they've got Dimp running it, and you've got me with my perspective on certain games, and you with your perspective and everything. And we just whoever's got it at that moment in time does what they think is the right thing to do.
Well, that's why you create Jira tickets, so there's consistency across the working platform. So but we won't get into that. So Baldur's Gate 3 at the moment is out. It came out on the 3rd of August. So the time people listen to this is a couple of days old or a little bit longer if you're in our public feed. I mean, we've got a handful of patrons, so there's literally very few people that will hear this early. And I bet they don't even listen to it until Monday. In fact, some of them I know don't even listen to it on the private feed. They wait for it to drop in the public feed. And I think, well, what are you doing? But that's up to them. The game is said to be at least 100 hours long, perhaps longer with all the side content, up to 200 hours I've seen quoted in various articles and whatnot. This has been early access for 2 to 3 years, this game. They didn't give they didn't give the game in its full to the reviewers until Sunday the 30th. So they gave them 4 to 5 days to get through this. That's why, as we record this, there are no reviews. There's no aggregate score on OpenCritic. Now, some people have attached a score to it. I would tend to be sceptical about how much they've played of that, because how can you do that? I don't even know if there's 150. It's not 150 hours between Sunday and the day it came out. So I'd query those outlets that are putting scores on it saying it's done, they're dusted. Reviewing progress is fine. You just say, look, we're doing this. Here's our faults at the moment. But the early ones that you're seeing, I'll be looking at and saying maybe strike them off any sort of list of acceptable opinion, because they're just trying to get in early. I would say, to get them clicks, as what people do. There's also a few things in that the people that were in the early access period had to delete. It was suggested by Larian, who are the studio, to delete their early access save. Don't carry it over because there might be issues with the full game. And I think that got a few backs up, because you could play like 20 odd hours. The Act 1 it was, and you'd have to flush all that and start again. I'm sure most people probably thought about doing that, but again, that's just something that's there. I guess what I'm saying with all this is it's been early access for several years, and they seem to have just somehow made a hash of the release date, and we know it's not coming to Xbox until later because of the Xbox Series S. That was going to be a topic today, but I don't think we should labour home that little Series S. It's the exception rather than the rule, but it is throwing up scenarios where it's difficult for developers to get it out on time. The PlayStation version is another month away. But yeah, I just thought, we've got any thoughts on how a game can be sitting there ingested for 2-3 years in early access of all this data, all this stuff, and then when it's sort of D-Day to release it, there's still an element of like, oh, we've just got to jam this out still. And you kind of think, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I mean, first thought is we always like to give that Series S a bit of a kick in where possible, because it is a fucking ludicrous drag, I think is what I'd call it.
What I'm starting to see now for the Series S, and like I said, I'm not going to overreact because it is just a very few number of instances, but it's like you sort of later in life, you find this new woman to go out with, and you're like, and that's the Series X. You're like, cool, what a stunner! What an absolute stunner that is! What a salt!
Anyway, I expected you to go with this.
Well, you start seeing them for like a few weeks, maybe a few months, or whatever, and you think this is great. Actually, this is excellent. This is exactly what I wanted. And then 6 to 8 weeks later, you sort of go around there, and they go, "Oh, wanting to introduce you to the Xbox Series S. This is my child from another relationship. And you're like, what? And then you have to deal with him all the time, and it's cock blocking all the time. And you think, well, this is not what I signed up for. It's getting in the way of what we were doing up until now. That's how I'm seeing this Series S, a little unwanted child in a later life relationship getting in the way of activities.
I'm always torn with it, right? Because I like the idea that there's an option for certain gamers, whoever that might be, but it's just such a pain in the arse to have a console that isn't as powerful. Like it's just not what you want. You know, back in the day, it just used to be a case of you got one to deal with, and now they're trying to do it like sometimes on an Xbox Series X, an Xbox Series S, Xbox One, PS4, PS5,
Xbox
PC.
One X, PS4 Pro, Switch. Hello.
Well, yeah. You just sort of think, I feel sorry for the developers when they're going, how the fuck do we do this then? Like, how do we optimize our game and design a game so it can get on them? You know, because you're going to want it to be available to as many people as possible.
But if you're going to make cuts, you're going to say, where's the market share? Okay, we'll cut the bottom out. We'll prioritise the others. And, you know, we've got there's a story coming up later about the PS5 sales, and there's no question who the dominant forces are on that particular area. And if you need to make those cuts for whatever reason, it's an easy business decision. You don't even need to get Alan to crunch the numbers.
No. And I wonder at what point they do think about... I mean, they'll never discontinue it, but it feels like it's here to stay. But I wonder how long it can be supported for, because we've discussed this before, they want parity of features. Yeah. But I wonder how long that can continue for throughout this generation
they have to see it through.
Well,
I'll tell you what, because again, the frustrating thing about Microsoft, they don't release much data at all. They don't tell us how many consoles they've sold. They'll tell us, don't you worry, they'll tell us how much Game Pass has grown since they've rebranded Xbox Live Gold to Game Pass Core, which I argue is not in the spirit of Game Pass. You know, it's not Game Pass, is it? Because Game Pass to me is this 200 game library, and that's a 25 game library of TUT. And there's a difference there. So they'll tell us when that happens, and everyone will go, "Cool, what a master stroke!" It's like, well, how much more money have you made? Probably a bit more, but I don't think it's made a significant difference. They don't talk about the console sales.
No, because it won't shine in a good light, perhaps.
Basically, If you don't hear anything from any of these places, it ain't going well. If it's going well, they'll tell you. It's as simple as that. And but I would be really interested what the split is between Xbox Series S and Xbox Series X, because some of the rumours and articles that I read suggest that there's more Series S consoles out there than Series X.
No. Really?
Well, I mean, look, that's all rumour and innuendo.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, or if it's even close, even if it wasn't close, the fact that they said, don't worry, we've got you covered on this Series S, it won't matter. Can he really go back on that? Because I think
people will be going, I want a refund.
Of course, and rightly so. You can't.
And they'll get sued and whatnot, no doubt.
Well, I don't know. They always get away. If you've got enough money, you can just pump that away. But it's just they're very concerned about the optics, because in other areas they're deficient or have been deficient, and I think that's a smart move to make sure at least you're pumping the propaganda out there for people to latch onto.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing, right? I'm not, theoretically, it's a good thing that you can buy a console. They ain't got a disk drive. It's a little bit less powerful. You get a little bit cheaper. If you haven't got the money for a Series X, and you still get to play the games that everyone else gets to play, but you might get a locked frame rate or whatever it is that So there are disadvantages to it, but it's a fucking drag if you've got an Xbox Series X or if you've got a powerful PC, because but we said we weren't going to labour that, and we have. So back to Baldur's Gate 3. What was the question? What do I reckon?
It don't matter.
I think broadly on the early access piece, I think you should be getting that fucking lined up. It should be smooth as butter getting that out after 2 or 3 years to prep it.
But it's a fucking massive game. I'll tell you what, I am sniffing around this one.
Oh, I just saw saying the best CRPG ever.
I've never really played this. This is the thing. I hadn't really played a proper JRPG other than Pokemon until Persona. Love that. a CRPG, computer role. I mean, I don't really know the distinction, if I'm honest, between that and other ones. I'll have to really look into that. I remember I read something and I was like, what are you talking about? This is on consoles. It's not what I would classically call a computer. But someone will be in the comments going, oh. I'll be like, well, okay. But I want to play one. Anyway, I want to play one. Obviously, now's not the time to do that because we've got Final Fantasy 16 going. I've just crumbled and bought that F1 game because I went to the Grand Prix last weekend. So that's been done. It's got a story mode, Logan.
Right.
How can I not? And they do a story mode every 2 years. So I'm in the cadence of when the story... So this year will be F1 23. Next year will be F1 Manager 24. And then I'll just rotate every other year between them. Otherwise you get bored. And both of these fucks should be doing what Football Manager were doing, giving you some sort of loyalty discount, $5 off for the next version. But
I think that's gone, by the way.
Oh, for fuck's sake! Well,
I actually don't know.
To be fair, it's on Game Pass. That's just as good, really, for most people.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm sniffing around Baldur's Gate 3. Obviously, the name Baldur's Gate 3 is a concern because there's two others, even though it wasn't developed by Larian, and they just kind of, I think they've bolted onto the name to get a bit of a boost. It wouldn't have needed a boost, to be honest, but there's catch-ups and things. I think that's my agreement now, that games that are that old, going back 20 years, I'm not going to sit through and play. But yeah, after Starfield and after Spider-Man in October, I'm thinking like November time, might jump on this.
What do you play it on?
PC. I think
even if it was there on console?
It will be, by then it should be on PS5. I just think that these sorts of games just work a bit better with, it's turn-based, like having a mouse just to move around the menus. I'm sure the conversion to the controller is great, but there are certain games I just look at and go, that feels like a PC game to me.
Yeah, 100%.
And I'll sit hunched over in this chair getting backache for hundreds of hours on end, which is fine. But anyway, that's Baldur's Gate 3. We will check in on the reviews when there's a score. I suspect by the time this episode drops, there may well be an aggregate score because a couple of people want to rush it out. But certainly I expect by next week, should we do an episode, which I'm sure we will, there'll be a score there for us to discuss. So we'll try not to labour it too much, but it'll be interesting to see how it's shaping up. I personally think it's going to be one of the best scoring games of the year. So well done to Adkins and Parky, I guess. Anyway, this is Idle Game Chat, Dimp Digital's flagship video game podcast. 22 minutes in is the intro. We've got Apps, me, and we've got Logan on the other side. The resident referee and our FGL Grand Prix winner, currently leading the FGL Championship, so he could be crowned the ultimate champion by the end of this year. But Parky may be starting to wake up with high 90s with Baldur's Gate 3. It could just supercharge his last drive towards trying to take the trophy off him. If you want to support us, patreon.com/Dimp Digital is the place to go. Core community there and in pocket hashtag. Twitch.tv/Dimp Digital. You can also kind of support us because you can subscribe to the channel for free with Twitch Prime, which you get free if you've got Amazon Prime. All you got to do is click it. Now, there's no podcast on there. It's just us playing games of various quality and at various times. There's not even a schedule. So if you want to do it, you get some emotes, I guess. But there's no guarantee we'll stream that month. But if you're doing it out of the goodness of your heart, it doesn't matter, does it? But most people aren't. They want something in return, unfortunately. Anyway, scupper on. So a bit of PlayStation, a bit of a double whammy here. PS5 has sold more than 40 million units worldwide, is what has been announced by Sony Interactive Entertainment. So they're happy with that because they've announced it. And this is before I think their financials will be due in the next few weeks. So normally you'd hear it then, but the fact they've got out ahead of it and gone, yep, 40 mil. It's tracking slightly slower than what the PS4 was, but as far as I remember, the PS4 didn't have a pandemic and mass shortages to deal with. So the fact that it's even close to it seems pretty impressive. It's clearly dominating the space between the Microsoft and the Sony consoles. Switch running away with it still, but it's been out 6 years at 120. I think it's even maybe got into 130 million now, so that's laughing. What do you think of these sales? I mean, we don't know how many Xboxes are out there, but about half, they reckon, potentially. And half of those could be Series S's, so do they even count when there's games that can't even run on it?
Considering they've also hiked the price in that time as well.
Well, that's the interesting thing, because in Europe, in some territories in Europe and in UK, it's actually had a price cut for the last week or so. So I was going to ask you about that shortly, but I thought I'd just get that in there. It's only temporary, so actually I think the 7th it ends, so there's a good chance that people listening to this have missed the boat. If they're waiting for this podcast to inform them of a price cut, they have missed the boat probably. But that's up to them. But yeah, just thought I'd get that in there. That there has been a little price cut in the last couple of weeks or so. But these stats were revealed before the price cut. So yeah, these were after price hikes in every territory other than the US, basically.
I mean, we've obviously discussed at length in previous podcasts. Go and have a listen about the games.
What do you think about listening to old podcasts about old news?
Well,
because I actually have started doing it with other podcasts, and it's not as irrelevant as you think. Just because it's sort of, they're talking about affairs that happened years ago, but in my head I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. It's to be interesting to hear what they, because you know how it all pans out as well, so you can go, well, you've blown that.
Slightly from the future, but you are.
You've you've blown that. That's a complete wrong analysis there. But
I don't know. I mean, I tend to like. There's certain podcasts that I'd listen to that are not like news related,
evergreen,
and I'll quite happily go back and like it's irrelevant whether it's a new one or it's from 2 years ago. Like it really makes no difference. I wouldn't be that bothered because it's actually more entertaining sometimes to listen to things backwards with hindsight.
Yeah,
well, it's not even hindsight, is it? It's with future sight.
Yeah,
knowing how it all panned out, to be able to sit there and go, "Ha, idiots! What are you talking about?" But yeah, I think on the PlayStation front, fair play. I think clearly, if you're looking at a console where you'll be able to play good games, PlayStation's the one.
No, that's not what I see on Twitter. I see Xbox is the one. And yet, once again, like Trump getting in power, it's wrong. They told me he couldn't get in. They tell me that Xbox is unbeatable, and then the stats come out, and you go, "Well, it ain't."
No, I mean it's the biggest problem.
Wind people up. I mentioned Trump.
Yeah, I know the Green, Trump, and going against the Green Bloods. It's an interesting tactic.
Fuck them.
Yeah, I think. The biggest problem Microsoft have got is they just haven't got games. Like, if you're looking at objectively,
Starfield, 1 month away.
It's not going to be that good.
Well, third highest rated game of the year. That's the next call.
Honestly, everyone was getting all het up about Fallout, whatever it was, and that turned out to be a pile of old shit.
It did. It did.
I mean, I'm not saying Starfield's going to be that, but I just don't think it's going to be the second coming. I really don't. But anyway, happy to be wrong on that. I'm always happy to be wrong.
You're going to play it either way, are you?
No, it don't matter to me. It doesn't really look like my sort of bag. It's a No Man's Sky with plus
That's
plus
annoy
on
people.
it. I know. I love doing stuff like that. It's hear them all crying as they're listening to it. But anyway, my point is we've been over it multiple times.
You're antagonising the audience today.
I know. I don't know what it is. I think this week's really got to me.
Yeah.
Being in that fucking shithole. So, PlayStation.
We'll get there.
Game.
We started this topic about 8 minutes ago. And
we're really struggling today to keep on track. I mean, we usually do, but today worse than ever. I think just broadly, there's just not... If you're looking at it objectively, they're pretty much a similar price, right? I don't think there's a huge differential between them.
Well, I don't think now, since the Xbox followed Jim and bumped the prices up, I don't think there is now. There was for a few months, certainly, for about half a year. And then Phil still got no plans to do it, and then lied and did it anyway. That's what I mean about the propaganda. It's like it's clear lie, clear bollocks being spouted.
I'm pretty sure we called that at the time and went, well, it just gives them the good PR for a while, and eventually they'll go, yeah.
He had to get out because he said at this time. That was his little get out clause. He knew what he was doing, but people were saying...
The government do it regularly. They go, we've got no plans this time. You think, well, why have you said at this time? Because you know that at this time you ain't going to do it now, but you will do it later anyway. So I think there's no real price differential. Arguably, you've got Game Pass, which might be attractive to some people, but broadly, there's just a better set of games available on the PlayStation. You have to say that there is. There's no
200 games on Game Pass can't be competed on value.
Oh, but there's so much shit on there.
There is.
I've been through it lately, and I've been going through, and I'm like, how can there be so much to on here? Why is there nothing good on here? That's what I literally do regularly, anyway. So, yeah, I think that's the problem. Is you got better games available, and ultimately, people are going to be led by the games and where their friends are, and it's like a snowball effect, because more friends that are on there, the more people that are going to get it, the more people that jump on board, and it just grows. I mean, I think it looks like shit. I don't like the way it looks.
It's an awful looking machine. It really is.
I don't know who come up with that and went, yep. Like, it's bizarre to me.
It's just too big.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even mind the shape of it really, but it's just too tall.
I don't know where to put it. Like, it doesn't fit into any, like, you know, when you've got all these like TV units and this, that, and the other.
It'd only be fitting in those.
Or if it does fit, it just about fits.
I had to get rid of my old fucking my old shelf unit under here, and just get a flat table that was low enough that I could stand it up, so it didn't scrape on the table above it.
Mine's literally on the floor. It's literally standing up on the floor.
Yep.
Like I literally don't know what to do with it. It's bizarre. So they've blown that. I wonder whether they sometimes do this because they release it knowing that it's shit, and then when the Pro comes out, whatever they're going to call it, they'll pace it, and then and they'll go, and everyone will go, "Thank God for that! Get me one of them." But yeah, I just think they've done a better job of releasing better games, and that is ultimately the difference. Like you can still play your Fortnites, you can still play your Warzones with all your mates. Like there's no real need to go to a specific console for those sort of games anymore. You just go where there's
it's the inertia of it, isn't it? It just carries through from PS4 because it was clearly dominant. Because even like in reverse, there's people in the Dimp group who have the opposite inertia, where they'll always get an Xbox. Yeah. No matter how bad, quote unquote, it's doing, or it seems like it is, Pee-wee's always going to get an Xbox. Yeah. He's never going to get a PS5, is he?
I actually I like and prefer the Microsoft, and I don't know how this ever happens because it's only on an Xbox. I prefer like the software and the party system and the layout on an Xbox. It may just be because I've grown that way organically.
Fucking green blood in disguise, isn't you?
Yeah, but I don't have any. If someone said to me, "Oh, like we used to basically play everything, me, you, and Piper on PlayStation," like because that's what. And I never had any real issues with it. Like I didn't hate it. I just have a slight preference towards like the system that's been developed on the Xbox. Whether that's through familiarity or whatnot, I don't know. But I'll always largely get both, and I've said that for a while, and I'm comfortable with doing that, and I'll just go wherever the wind blows. Yeah. But if you're looking at it objectively and you only want one, like there's only one winner in my view, and that is PlayStation, because it's just churning out better games.
For now, that tide will turn by the end of this generation, I predict. But I don't think it'll be enough to make a significant dent in their market share from a console perspective.
Well, it's like these iPhones. It don't matter how good these Androids get. No. People still turn their nose up at it. I think there's like the iPhone's got like a 58-60% share in the US, and most of those people will just continue going back.
It's because they make it a pain to switch. You lose fucking everything. I remember when I switched off
ecosystem
of iPhone, I was like, this is almost not worth it. But once I got over that hump, it was. Because for a while, those cheeky bastards ruined. I couldn't send an SMS message to someone like Biff, who was still an iPhone, because his iPhone still had me logged as an iMessage user, and it goes nope. And like to get him to do something, like he had to send something off to get my phone fucking unlocked, and I was like, "What? How is this allowed?"
Yeah, and
then WhatsApp came along and blew that away anyway. No one even uses text, as far as I know. I just don't be understanding the need for that when there's restrictions on messages and data and whatnot.
Well, that was that was one of the attractions, wasn't it? That's why they changed it. They did it like a blue. It comes up in blue rather than green. But yeah, I think once you're in those ecosystems, you're likely to stay there. And I think PlayStation and they do enough as well, and they've done enough largely to retain people. We've said before, 1 or 2 bangers a year. Yeah. Ideally, you'd want 1 a quarter, but once every 6 months, you can deal with
minimums, it. Yeah. They're cutting it very lean this year because it's going to be just 1. this rate, which will be on the low end. I don't know if you can stay ahead and sustain that sort of momentum with just
the
one
tailwind of Ragnarok, I think.
True, yeah, that does help. That just blows through the first quarter and a half of the year, doesn't it? And then,
basically.
Then you get Spider-Man starts ramping up, and that maybe it is only one, but I'd like at least another one if possible.
Yeah,
anyway,
agreed,
the PS5 sales in the UK jumped 75% after the price cut, so clearly that strategy kind of worked. And it must be said, the price cut itself was down to £400, so it was, I mean, that is because it was £450 at launch, and I think it went up to £475 once Jim got greedy. So the price cut was still lower, I guess, than the original price, is what I'm getting at. Because some people are like,
I feel like I paid over 500 for mine.
Did you just come with a game or anything?
Don't know. Or maybe I might be talking shit.
Yeah. Well, it's possible.
But for some reason in my head, I feel like I paid 550. But
absurd.
I'm sure it must be. I'll have to go back and check that because it's going to annoy me.
In any case, £400. It's been touted out, and you can still find it as we record this and for the first few days when this is public. There's two reasons why they might do this. I want to hear your opinion on both. These are just theories. There's probably at least a dozen, but these are the two I've come up with.
Yeah.
One, they're trying to shift inventory to make space for a new version of the PS5. Now, not a pro version. The rumour is that's not coming till next year at the earliest. But the rumours that have been circulated is that there may well be a version of the PS5 that comes with a detachable disk drive. So rather than having a digital version and a non-digital version, you have the PS5, and then as an option, you can buy the disk drive separately or have it bundled in. So rather than having two SKUs, basically, you've got one and the disk drive's optional, and you can add it or remove it as you please. That's one reason why. It's like, let's try and get rid of all these old tutters, and then later on this year, we'll announce this new venture that we're going for. The second reason may well be that they've seen, well, they know roughly what's going on in the console space, what their market share is, particularly against Microsoft. Whether they've seen how well they're doing momentum-wise and thought, let's just put our foot on their neck a bit more just for a few weeks before they get Starfield out, sort of bleed a few more consumers of their money, sort of get a few more people to jump over before Starfield, so they're left cap in hand when that comes out, and just try and build a little bit of a buffer. And then when Spider-Man comes out, they'll have another upsurge, I would imagine, with the special edition of that and that game coming out, which will drawing a lot of quote-unquote more casual gamers because it's Spider-Man. What do you think of those two potential theories, or is there a third one that you can calculate in this short time that I've given you?
So firstly, I didn't pay 550. I paid 449.99. So I was talking bollocks. Yeah. So just wanted to correct the records there.
There were bundles of 550 at one. I mean, in fact, because they were so hard to get, you had to pay 550 to get game. We're doing this thing. They give you a fucking hat. It was 580 quid. You get two shit games and a hat. And I was like, oh, come on. Cheeky bastards. Anyway.
A hat. So, it's a weird one because normally things are put on sale to shift stock.
Yes.
For whatever reason.
Yeah.
Like whether you're not doing well enough or whether you just want to decrease inventory for whatever reason,
particularly when you just took the hit to raise the prices 6 months ago. You just took the optical loss of people going, you greedy bastards. And then
sometimes this is a marketing strategy that's deployed, right? There's an increase in price, and then they put it on sale, but it's still more expensive than it was before the price increase, right? So what usually happens is that they go, because you put it up, and they go, all right, we'll put it on sale, and they go, oh yeah.
Yeah,
perhaps 25%. Really, you're just getting shafted up the arse anyway because you're still paying more than you would have done before the bloody price increase. But
I have seen that.
I think
Amazon are the worst at doing that. Amazon Prime Day, it was cheaper last week. If you check it, what?
Yeah,
what we doing?
Yeah, that's where they get you. It's just a marketing ploy at the end of the day. But I think both of your theories are plausible. I think it's strange that on a surge of sales, they've decided to reduce the price. Like,
When it's not needed, it's not struggling to shift inventory.
Like normally you're trying to incentivize people to make the jump for whatever reason. I'd be surprised if it's just because they've just got a fucking stock of these that they just want to get rid of.
Yeah.
You do wonder whether they've looked at it and they're trying to get more people on before Spider-Man, or perhaps even do something to disrupt Xbox. But you think surely they just know that they've got such a big share anyway, it's feet up.
Yeah.
So I suspect there's multiple reasons for it, but I don't know, maybe they did just have a surge of stock and was like, we want to get people on board, as you say, and reduce that stock down by X amount of units before whatever we've got coming, or before a game release. But it seems a bit... I'd be surprised if they were that worried about Starfield.
Yeah.
Like attracting Xbox people to buy an Xbox. It doesn't feel like that kind of game to me. I thought Halo was going to be that sort of game. It'd get people to jump on that, but alas.
Well, they tried.
Which one do you think? Do you think it's both of those, or what do you reckon is the driver?
I'd be less inclined to believe it's to disrupt Xbox. I don't think they care. Yeah. Because there's very few things they'll make note of, and they don't need to do anything to do that. I mean, that's purely would be just a fuck you. I don't think they're not that petty. I don't think either of them are that petty to do that. Really, like when it comes to a business decision where you're selling it at a good price already, you've raised the prices, to suddenly undercut yourself to just spite a competitor that's still struggling to shift their hardware, doing fine on the software and the services front, but on the hardware front, which gives people the easiest access.
Off the back of Redfall as well, by the way.
Yeah, they simply don't need to do that. You'd be better off doing it when Starfield come out and say, well, for 400 quid, you can get this and play Spider-Man next month. That would be, if you wanted to do it that way and undercut them, you do it directly on top of it to try and disrupt some sort of marketing there. But so I do tend to lean to the fact that A, they might have just been feeling generous, which is not the case, but who knows. But B, they may have just been, there's a move to shift a few more because of this potential rumoured new version appearing. Clear the decks. Although in saying that, the Spider-Man Special Edition, which would have been the perfect way to do it, which is coming out September and the game comes out October, is still the old version. So they're going to chuck... I mean, they're always limited anyway, so there's not going to be millions of those lurking. There'll be a few 100,000 at most. But yeah, that's what I tend to lean towards, is either there's some sort of inventory clearing, and we'll see some newer version of the PS5. I don't think it's going to be the slim version that everyone wants. So those that can't stand the look of it and won't buy it because of how big it is, I think you'll be solely disappointed when you see what this is. It'll still be pretty ugly and pretty big. It's just that you can take the disk drive out or not have one at all, rather than having to buy a separate... Because I actually bought the digital version originally, locked myself into that, and then I thought, that's daft because I can't borrow games off of that library called Adkins.
Yeah.
So I then sold it for the price I paid and got a disc one. Whereas had this rumoured, additional disc, I could have just made the decision later on by myself and said, I'll just buy the disc drive and put it on. Start digital, then at a later date go, I'll buy the disc drive. Now I'll upgrade and borrow those games off that bloke.
Seems like a solution to a non-existent problem, really.
Well, I think what they've done is when they've done this, to me, I'm making assumptions. They've seen the digital version and the PS5, and they're like, it's actually a pain to produce these two different versions of it. Like even just the mold of the plastic and the covers, all that sort of shit. You've got to do two sets of everything. Whereas if we just unify it and say, right, there's an option to add it if you want, and it's up to the user, they can just make the same model, the same exact design, cheaper, more orders, whatever you want to do, and then it's down to us as a consumer to decide whether we want to pay for the disk drive or not have it. Yeah. And then
a fucking disk drive can't be expensive.
50 quid that'll be.
No, but this is what I mean, like in terms of manufacturing.
Oh no, they're marking that up massively. It's a joke. But it'd be interesting to see how much they price it for if this all comes true. Like, will it just be 50 quid? We'll see. No. You think it'll be more?
Yeah. A fucking controller nowadays is 60 quid. Although they've been on sale lately, by the way, £40.
Yeah, that to be fair, that's worth a go. If people needed one,
might be done by now.
That probably is. Again,
by the time this comes out,
shouldn't be waiting for this podcast to inform you of anything.
Yeah,
it's never.
So they're a third off.
Yeah,
give it a go.
They've done the whole
done
lot.
the math for you.
Just trying to see how much the digital version was at launch.
400, wasn't it?
I think it's free. It's free something. Got 389 here from Game. I feel like it was 350. You know, I could be wrong. Anyway, it was more than £50 off, is what I'm getting.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I remember I paid free something for it.
Yeah.
So you could, in theory, they could be charging 70 quid for this thing if that's how you're doing the math. That to upgrade to the disc version, it's a 70 quid premium. But
I would be surprised if a disc drive was cheaper than a controller.
Yeah.
But when you're actually trying to price things up, I'd expect it to be $79.99.
Yeah.
In my head.
360 quid. Yeah, so it was 90 quid cheaper. That's what I mean. To be honest, at that time, I thought 360 quid for a PS5.
Yeah,
I was like, that's fucking ludicrous.
Same
really.
power, just no disc drive.
Yeah.
You're probably thinking, how many games do I pay via disc anyway? And then went, well, Adkins is buying them all on fucking disc.
Yeah, I may actually revert back to that at some point. But
what, the digital piece?
Yeah, we'll see.
Tricky, isn't it?
It's tricky, just because sometimes I feel bad for him because I sort of get all these games off him and then he gets nothing in return. Like,
he's going to buy them anyway.
Well, yeah.
He ain't going to trade it because he wants that little collection to grow. So don't worry about it, is what I'd say.
No. Anyway, that's PS5 news. What we got here? Zelda Tears of the Kingdom shifts 18.5 million units in Q1 2020. It says 2024 here, but
they've blown that.
Maybe it's the fiscal year. You know, they fuck about and they do it for next. I don't know how it works. Anyway, it's sold a shitload of units. So clearly, when you produce a game of quality, it will get people rattled through it. I'm surprised you've not been tempted by this, just because I know you love Zelda.
I don't get Zelda. It's never been one that I've particularly got. Even when I was a kid and I used to play it on people's Game Boys, I was a bit like, I just didn't really ever get it, and I still haven't really been tempted. I would probably enjoy it if I picked it up, but it means I've got to fucking hunch over on that. Honestly, anything on that Switch is a real challenge for me. I get why some people enjoy it, but I just find it an unenjoyable way largely to game.
Yeah, I do. I mean, that's why I play it in docked, and it looks like shit. But it's either that or get neck ache, and I think, well, I'll take the eye bleedingly poor visuals at times.
The thing is with that Switch, it's not even comfortable to hold it. Like it annoys me. Like I don't know. Like back in the day with handheld consoles, they were light and not too intrusive and easy to hold, and I find that just a bit too bulky. And I just don't enjoy playing. I like mobile gaming. Like I'm all for handheld stuff, but I just don't enjoy
that
handheld gaming with that Switch.
Time to get a Steam Deck. Sort of a one toe into Master Race. Portable PC, innit?
I'm more likely to just... I'm more likely to just go full PC.
Yeah.
I would rather do that, even if I just fucking do my emails on it.
Yeah. That itself is almost worth having one for. Resident Evil 2 Remake is now the best-selling entry in the entire franchise.
Cool.
So 12.6 million units according to Capcom. They've updated their platinum titles list, which you can see on their website, which I think is cool to look at. Not many places do that. You can see the rankings of all their games and how much they've sold.
Most of the time they don't want to do that because there's so much shit there. They don't want to
we'll see.
Publicise it.
We'll see where Exoprimal ends up in a year.
Good lord.
1 million players being touted, 1 million logons, they mean.
Yeah.
And,
tell me how many of them are there in fucking a month.
Yes. So actually, I didn't know this. I'd forgotten this. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard was the previous top seller at 12.4 million units. In my head, I thought it was still Resident Evil 6 because I remember that being the highest selling for ages. And I was like, that's the worst entry And how is that the top selling one? But that was well knocked off, so not a worry there. But anyway, that's not a game you're going to play. But have you seen anyone? Have you watched a playthrough of that yet? Resident Evil 2 remake. Yeah.
Everyone absolutely raved. The guy that I raved about that watched it, Brown Man, he was raving about it. He's like, this is probably my favourite. I think he said it was his favourite one ever anyway.
Right.
And he was like, this is just like the remake is just so good.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's weird watching some of the different Resident Evils. 'Cause I'm not saying that I've particularly obviously watched the OG versions. And it's just interesting to watch some of them that have come back. And I'm like, it doesn't even feel like a Resident Evil game that I would understand to be Resident Evil. Like, it's not all just like zombies and stuff. It's interesting to see the dynamic of how it all changes and stuff.
Well, that was one of the reasons why I think it done so well, is because it kind of broke away from that mould. And at the time, there weren't really too many third-person, over-the-shoulder type games. It kind of ushered in that particular kind of perspective, or at least it normalised it or made it something to aspire to be. There was definitely a few games that were doing it before. But yeah, I really like the remake, so I say well-deserved. That was a excellent title to play. And one of the few games, like I said, when I was talking about Persona 5 Royal, that managed to breach that playthrough and get in there, and I was playing both of them at the same time. A lot of other stuff had to be shunned off.
Shelved,
Star Wars and the likes of that, I was like, nope, not interested. But Resident Evil 4, I was like, I have to just get on this. Which in hindsight was a bit of a mistake, but you live and you learn, don't you? You live and you learn. Last one. Maybe the last one. Layoffs reported at Callisto Protocol Studio striking distance.
Yeah, I saw that.
Game's final DLC was released in June. So people have taken to Twitter. So the staff there has just basically been saying, been laid off and now looking for work. 32 employees apparently have been laid off. IGN, Crafton said, here we go, what they say to IGN. Striking Distance Studio and Crafton have implemented strategic... Listen to the bollocks. I've seen this so many times in my life of working. Striking Distance and Crafton have implemented strategic changes that realign the studio's priorities to better position its current and future projects for success. Unfortunately, these changes have impacted 32 colleagues. And there's another bit about, they've got severance packages and whatnot, but unfortunate. I mean, people tend to roll off. Well, yeah, it is.
It always is.
People tend to roll off gaming projects all the time after it launches because you were hammering away on this game, getting it out for launch, and then suddenly the work kind of dries up, I guess. But this game, I guess, I don't think it gives it a good sign for what the future is for Striking Distance, simply because the game underperformed. Crafton even come out and said it. The game critically underperformed quite poorly, in my view. I mean, I thought it was good, but me and Adkins are in the minority of that completely.
I think it was sort of rated in the high 70s, didn't it? Was it?
No, it was
like 60s?
High 60s, yeah. So we're talking down in the doldrums of Redfall, which...
Yeah.
I mean, what are we doing in life?
It didn't seem like that. I mean, it seemed a bit bland. I think there wasn't the variety, I think, as you went through it. Because I watched the whole playthrough.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that I noticed.
It was a bit one note, for sure.
But as a kind of... The problem with it was that it was always this, how does this Dead Space successor, the spiritual successor to Dead Space.
67 it's got.
Yeah, and I think that hurt it. And I think because it didn't hit the same notes as Dead Space.
As one of the greatest survival horror games of all time, dare it not get to that platinum standard.
Yeah, but this is the bizarre thing, And it looks like a good, solid game. Like it run really well as far as I can see. I know there was a few issues with it at the start, but they ironed that out pretty quickly.
It's fine on PS5 basically. PC was a bit of a shitter, and then Xbox was a bit of a toilet. But yeah, like you said, it got ironed out.
I mean, it's a shame, but it's brutal, right? The industry is brutal, and you just have to move on to the next one, I guess.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to play.
Interesting to see what it works on.
Yeah, I'd play another one, but they're not going to get given the same level of money and investment as they got for this first one. So I think, well,
how's it going to be better?
It was quite an expensive game in comparison, especially to what it sold. Like, it got nowhere close to what it should have done, and that makes me think if you had all that money to start with and then struggled a bit, with less money, are you going to be able to pivot and what are you going to do with a leaner operation? But yeah, that's a shame. I don't think that bodes well for Callisto Protocol 2. The game's final DLC has been released. I will get to that and play it at some point. But yeah, that's not a good trending topic there. Last one here. This is a bit of an old one, but worth just ruffling feathers. Ratchet, this is from IGN, this is the headline. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart on PC is basically unplayable without the SSD. So it's not quite. I mean, I've seen the footage and look, basically people are saying Sony lied about that SSD, saying this was only possible, and I'm paraphrasing, they kind of allude to this, it's only possible because of the SSD. And I think what's borne out is that technically that's a lie because the game is running on old turt. Like, technically, it ticks the box. But anyone that's watched the footage or seen it or run it, in good faith, that is not a good version of the game to play. I don't think it seems a little bit contrarian just to say, well, it's running, so you lied. Like, if they released the game and it performed in that state, it would have crapped on. In no way would it be sitting there on 89. It would be down in the 60s. So fundamentally, the portal shifting parts of the game where it instantly transfers you to a new map and whatnot, it pauses for so long that one of the USPs of the game, like instant transfer of worlds, seamless transfer of worlds, that sort of ore factor, doesn't work unless you've got an SSD equivalent or a rig that's got higher memory and stuff like that can leverage the more powerful parts of the PC. I would just point people toward, I think Digital Foundry did a direct, it would be last week by the time people are listening to this, there's a segment towards the back end of their podcast. They kind of explain this in more detail with more authority than I ever could. But it caused there's a lot of people getting angry about this and people that hadn't even played it and had no intention of playing it. And they were like, they lied. And I was like, they probably over-egged it slightly.
So they normally have like minimum requirements and recommended requirements, don't they? And is it their recommended requirements whether...
So you can run it... So the recommended requirement does have a hard drive, not an SSD.
Right.
Runs at 720p and 30 FPS. But when you transfer through those worlds,
right?
I mean, I don't know anyone who, in good faith, would sit there and say, "Yeah, that's a good version of the game." They've scaled it as far down as they could, but it's clearly a
interesting.
It clearly, I don't think, is a good enough version for you to tick that as a box and say, "Well, that proves them wrong."
That's recommended.
Because I feel like every game you could, in theory, technically make work on any old shit. If you had the time and the effort and the resource, but the amount of compromise you make, like, is that even? Yeah. The experience is lost at that point for some of the key features. So I don't know. They certainly did over-egg that SSD, but I think it's borne out in some of the footage you can see. And like I said, go to their podcast and listen to their little bit, and they'll tell you. But potentially Sony caught lying. Some are saying.
Not good, is it? And you think, I don't know why you just wouldn't be transparent. Like, they normally are pretty good in saying you need this. Like, it's strange that they'd.
Well, I think at the time,
like Ratchet and Clank as well. So that's a bit.
So when did this game come out? 2021. I mean, we're in 2023, so it's taken 2 years of solid dev to get it working on PC and to scale it down. So again, it's kind of like you can you really do it? Here we go. There's a little quote here. What's this from? Based on Digital Foundry, knows possible to play. So the main video, I think this is from Digital Foundry. The main video here shows the game running on a minimum spec PC as well, but using an SSD. And as you watch the video, you'll notice it's quite playable in comparison. The poor HDD cannot cope at all. And then Insomniac's community chief, James Stevenson, cheekily responded to that and said, "As we said." So he's trying to claw it back. But well, anyone who wants to buy and play it on the HDD, I say have at it, but you will be playing a game that will be rated in the 60s, so
yeah,
I don't think that's the same. Anyway, that'll do. Goodbye. Don't know what we've got next. I haven't planned it, so you know more than I do. Any final comments?
No, I don't think so. No, just disappointed to see PlayStation generally have done a pretty good job on the whole of the ports over to PC. So it's interesting that they've seemed to have blown it with this Ratchet and Clank one 2 years later.
Well, I think it's okay, but it's the minimum spec that they've put on there. I think they've done it on purpose to highlight that it kind of needs an SSD. So if you're running a decent, like an SSD in a decent sized rig, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's got a few problems, but it's not terrible. It's not like The Last of Us. But what people are looking for here is, can it run without the PS5 SSD or an SSD at all? And the answer is, by the letter of the law, it can. But you are severely tampering down the experience to a point where I don't think anyone in their right mind would say it's acceptable.
It's a bending of the truth, basically. Yeah, interesting.
But
Sneaky,
but I don't know. I think if the game runs that badly without it, it kind of proves the point that you kind of do need it. Like,
agreed.
But I don't know. People, it's very tribal out there at the moment. That's why we have to rattle their cages if they're listening and catch them crying about it is. Fuck, these people need executing probably, but like I said, on my private island,
perspective required.
That's not possible, is it? But you haven't got to be a complete thick moron about it either. That is extremes. Like I said, the 20% on each side need to be just wiped out of the conversation. Leave the rest of us to it. But unfortunately, the loudest are usually the thickest. Anyway, I think more for this particular issue. We will see you on the other side. Here we are then, back with some game impressions to close out Idle Game Chat for this episode. I'm joined by Logan, the resident referee, who may have been in the first part of Idle Game Chat. We never know these days. All recorded independently, these game impressions, so could have been Adkins, could have been Logan, could have been a special guest. Who's to know? But he's here to report back on Supraland, which is, I'm going to have to look at that each time I say it, because I'm obviously tempted to say Superland. But this is this was
understandably
this was developed by Supra Games, so they're clearly trying to be on brand there. I did some research into other games and whatnot. I mean, this is their first game, Supraland. They are working on what I can only assume is going to be a follow-up called Supra World. So again, that Supra is really getting the plaudits from their perspective. Published by Humble Games, and was actually originally released back in 2021. But here we are, picking up yet another, what I can only assume to be a palate cleanser. I can't believe you sat down for Supraland and thought, well, this is now going to be me for the next few months. This is my most anticipated game that I've just unearthed. It was clearly there for feet up approach and just get something ticking along. But cards on the table, Supraland. How are we finding this? Another Game Pass jobby, I suspect.
Yeah, so it's another feet up Game Pass game that I was supposed to play. And I basically just thought, I sort of read the description, had a look at some of the, I like to watch the trailers and some of the clips and stuff, and I sort of go, is this my sort of game? And I like a little puzzly beat up game that's sort of harmless, and I like playing some of the indie stuff as well, kind of some of the left field stuff that might not really get a little bit of a look in. And I think I've said before, this is kind of one of the things that I like about Game Pass, is it lets you harmlessly play some of this stuff that you otherwise might just not ever even bother looking at.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the advantages to it for sure. So let's do a little bit of store page sleuthing here. Supraland, I've got it up here. I've got the PC or the Xbox PC app up, which is linked into my Game Pass account. Here we go. Embark on a valiant quest to save your toy village in the hit first-person open-world puzzle platformer. So there's a lot of perspectives and genres being chucked around there. Roam and explore a huge interconnected world, unlock powerful new abilities, and combine them to overcome imaginative puzzles or uncover shrouded secrets. Defeat charging hordes in fast, frenetic first-person combat as you battle your way towards an audience with the Blue King. Supraland is the ultimate sandbox adventure and offers players a fresh take on puzzles, exploration, and adventure. Game of the year, according to them, the way they've wrote that little synopsis down.
Always makes me laugh.
It is funny, isn't it? Again, interesting, because we complained about this historically. Game features 12 to 25 hours of open world puzzle, action, and platformer gameplay. So again, they're listing it in the description. Now with the update that's gone into the PC game, the Xbox PC app, how long to beat is plugged into the interface. So most games, it will give you the how long to beat timings that have been collated. So that's really smart from Xbox to do that, because we've historically chastised and come up with... Because I said I didn't want to see the hours. I don't know if you remember. I said I don't want to be seeing the exact hours because it's a spoiler. Like Ronnie was being pathetic. And you was like, well, what if it was like a grading, like, long, short, medium, and there's like a range. Whereas now they just chuck it out in front of me. So, I've got no choice but just to get over those. Sometimes Ronnie needs a kick up the arse, and this, in the circumstances, can get rid of his little quirks. But, yeah, so well, maybe you didn't read the description, so maybe you didn't know how long you were getting him for. But... in terms of the overall package that they've presented there, accurate?
Well, how many hours did they say?
They're saying 12 to 25, so they doubled it. So it's, minimum 12, no more than 25.
Right. So, just for context, I spent 1 day, 20 hours on this game.
Okay.
So what's that?
That's
44 hours? I know it's 72% complete, by the way.
Right, have you left this on? We've had this discussion. I don't know if this has come up before, but I know sometimes I'm very much like, if I'm getting up to make a tea, I'll close it. I don't like things ticking along, ruining stats. Whereas I think you're a bit blasé about this and fall asleep, and also I've heard stories of you falling asleep whilst you're playing, nodding off.
I did that with Power Wash Simulator.
Yeah.
I was having that one day and I forgot about it. But Jodie jumped on it when I did that and did about 15 minutes of cleaning.
There we go. Shame you couldn't do that around the house, eh?
Largely, there would have been times when I've left it on, but largely that I don't feel like that's too far from the truth. And I believe from memory as well, it's across 2 sittings. Like I downloaded the game, deleted it, and then I re-downloaded it to finish it and completed it.
So did you do a Ronnie reset, or did you just carry on?
No.
Interesting. So that was that. I mean, that's excessively higher than what's been quoted on their store page. And even How Long to Beat has got it as main story, 12 hours, and then a completionist, which is normally like the whole kit and caboodle, 22 hours. You're adding 20 hours odd to that.
Yeah. I was to say,
something's gone wrong here.
Well, no, I don't feel like it has, because I fucking struggled with this game.
Right.
The reason I deleted it was because I could not fucking figure out how to progress the game.
Did you have to look anything up?
Yeah, to finish it, I actually used a guide. It was just too hard. And you're going through the guide and you're thinking, I would have never figured that out.
Right.
Unless I sat there for so fucking long. And I don't consider myself a stupid person, right?
Speak for yourself.
Generally speaking, but honestly, the reason I went back to it is because I was like, right, I must be missing something really simple here. I was like, I'm going to have to re-download it and finish it because Steve won't let it go. So I thought, one way or the other, I'm not the sort of person that likes to get a guide out.
No.
Like, that ruins the sense of achievement you get from completing puzzle games is by completing the puzzle.
Yeah.
Without stating the obvious.
No.
But I was like, if I can use the guide to get me to a point where I can kind of try and get past this hump that I'm at, then I might be able to see it off. But I had to pretty much use, from the point I went back to it, I pretty much use a guide to finish it.
Interesting. So let's back up here. We've got
Yeah.
open world, we've got first person perspective, and we've got puzzle
Yeah.
platformer.
There's a lot going on.
Nutshell, is that accurate as to what's
Yeah.
occurring here? Okay, so talk us through. I don't know how this game works and operates, because that could literally mean anything of any aspect, and it's claiming sandboxes and all sorts. So let's get down to the facts of what actually is being shipped out here by Supra Games.
Yeah, so basically, it's so difficult to explain because it's just nonsensical. But what you kind of start the game in Redville. So it's kind of Redville and Blueville. If you imagine a rubber, it's got a blue end and a red end, like your traditional rubber. And I don't know what the idea of this is. I don't know whether, because it's called a sandbox game, but you're literally in a sandbox.
Okay.
Like
Okay. So it's
right.
Because when they've put sandbox there, to be fair, I don't normally do this because I just think I can't be bothered. But they've put sandbox in quotes, so clearly they're being cute and trying to be clever about it. Right. Okay, that makes sense now.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're literally a toy figurine in a sandbox.
Okay.
And you have to make your way through the different, I guess, areas in the sandbox.
Yeah.
I guess it's the best way of describing it. So you literally start the game, and this is the narrative as well, is that you start the game and you go down into the well and the waters stop running. And then the King of Redville says,
oh dear.
go and figure out why the waters stop running. Go and see the King of Blueville.
So what are you, a little toy or something? Are you like a little red toy?
You're a little red figurine,
right, okay.
Little red, like...
What are they worried about water for? I don't need to drink that, do they?
This is what I'm saying. It's honestly... but so basically, the idea is that you have to traverse your way through each of these different sections, if you like, in the sandbox to get to the next part to move the story forward with the intent of getting through to see the Blue King.
Right, okay, yeah. So
but there's kind of different... And in each area, you're kind of introduced to... There's enemies and things. It's like little skeletons that spawn. And
so you've got combat in there as well. You can kill them.
I mean, you call it combat. So you've got a sword... which is very much, I'd say it's like Minecraft style combat.
Okay,
where,
yeah.
Like, you know when you hit a creeper and it bashes it back, like you've got the sword. It staggers it. So it's like that. And then you also get this gun so you can shoot them from distance, which has got a main and an alt fire as well. And that pretty much becomes the modus operandi for killing stuff. I mean, it's not a strong part of the game. No. It's really flimsy and it's not engaging combat. You just have to kill stuff to kind of get out your way and stop it irritating you, because they just keep coming after you if you don't get rid of them. There's no choice. You can't really just ignore them. But yeah, as you go through, you can basically collect coins and open chests, which give you different upgrades, which make you like, you can get like triple jump, that increase your sword strength, how fast you can hit the sword, same with your gun, like to make you more powerful as you kind of go through it. And then there's, as I say, you have to solve the puzzle in each of these different areas, which is the idea of then getting through to see the Blue King to figure out why the bloody water stopped.
Yeah. Let's say interesting. That's just a transitional comment you use on podcasts to keep it flowing whilst I think of the next thing to say based on what you presented. Okay, so we've got all those little bits and pieces in there.
Yeah.
Single player, clearly played on the Series X. That's all been ticked off in my mind.
Yeah.
So they're talking about puzzles and whatnot and platforming. Are all the puzzles, or most of them, based upon you trying to get to a location and work out how to get up or around it? Can you move objects? Can you is there physics and things? Like, what are these puzzle types? What are we trying to do? Is there and do you have to do you just stay in the area that you're in to solve it? Like, if you need an item, or is there like backtracking to older areas to pick up a fucking grain of sand that's special or something?
So generally what you need is in the area.
Okay.
So there's like some areas where you need to activate electricity you can spawn this purple ball, this purple cube, which allows you can either get on the cube to get over things, or you can use the cube to put on a button to activate a button. You can put the cube to transmit electricity, so it acts as kind of another transmitter in a line of electricity to activate something. But basically, there's just various different puzzles and it doesn't really, it just expects you to figure it out. Like, it just goes, everything's in this area off your pop. Like, there's no real training or introduction to any new mechanics or anything. It kind of just lets you just figure it out. So there'll be like certain, it's really difficult to explain without introducing spoilers, really, but essentially whatever you need's in that area, and you have to do things like, sometimes it's traversing to get somewhere, to activate something which will open a door to another area, and sometimes it will be just moving things through to open a door, shooting a barrel off something and getting the back. Like, but it's the in principle they sound really simple, but sometimes what you need to do it isn't, and it's you can see where the puzzles would be and things that are likely there for a purpose, but then getting all that together is quite difficult. So sometimes you have to colour things in a certain colour and put them in a certain place. There's a whole range of different things it introduces you to.
Yeah.
But it just introduces you to them. It doesn't really show you all the potential uses for that. So you can, as an example, there's sponge in there. Yeah. And the sponge, you think, can soak up water, but it can also soak up other things. Like, it just kind of gives you everything, and it just relies on you messing around with stuff until you stumble basically upon something that might work. It's a really odd style of, I mean, it's sandbox, I guess, in a way that it just gives you all of this stuff and goes, figure it out.
And is the way very some of the best puzzle games, there's sometimes multiple ways to do it, and your own sort of nose can work out how to do it. You go, oh, you speak to someone else, they say, oh no, I tried it this way and it worked. Or is this like you have to do the exact same specific tasks in this order, otherwise you won't progress? It's not going to allow any sort of creativity in that sense.
There's no creativity. There is a way to complete the puzzle. So as an example, I was stuck behind this door, right, where you go and speak to someone in front of a door, and I don't even give a shit about a spoiler at this point because no one's playing it. But you basically walk up to this guy and he's got a laptop and there's a hard drive on the wall. Don't ask me why this hard drive's on the wall. And he basically keeps saying no access is denied. And I'm like, well, surely there must be some sort of key card or something I need to
USB stick.
him. But this is your brain automatically comes to a solution. But I didn't. You get this power that allows you to magnetically transverse like pipes and things that you can make. All you got to do is say, go and talk to him, and then stand next to the hard drive whilst you're magnetically activated. And it basically just frazzles the hard drive and opens the door.
And is that like one? Is that like one ability of like many as well?
Yeah.
So you'd be standing there with like, I don't know, if there's a water ability or something. You could be. You wouldn't necessarily think magnetic ability is going to do that.
It doesn't introduce that concept of using your magnet ability to disrupt anything at any point during the game. It just goes, this is to transverse objects that are metal. And that's what I mean, when you could just be sitting there for fucking ages trying to figure out what to do, what's going on. Maybe I haven't come across something yet, maybe there's an ability that I don't know, maybe I've got to do something, but then it's just like, well, no, you just got to do that. This is what I mean with all the puzzles. That is just an example of how it just leaves you to it.
Wow.
And it seems really obvious, but I had to get a walkthrough for that, because I was like, there must be something that I'm missing for this door, and it wasn't. I had it for ages and the whole time, but I just couldn't get through it because it wasn't. And normally there's a subtle hint or something, right? Normally it'll go, oh no, maybe a magnet would disrupt it, or say like nothing. Well, nothing at all. There's no clues like
no
that.
access, it says, and that's the end of it. That's all you're getting out of this little fella. It says here, family-friendly visuals, which I can attest to. It says with countless crafty puzzles. So they're labelling them crafty to get away with it.
Yeah, they are crafty. But if it's the thing is, sometimes, and that's what I mean. Sometimes it trains you to go, it's so obvious.
Yeah.
Like this, all the puzzles are this obvious, and then some of them just aren't. Like, and you're like, well, so you go up to a puzzle and you think this could be really obvious or it could be really difficult. I don't know which one it's going to be. Like, there's some games that just go, this is just going to, like when we're playing The Division, right? And it goes, how are we going to get to this shade tech? And you go,
Yeah.
well, the game hasn't introduced anything ridiculous, so it's just going to be a case of trying to transverse something. And every now and again it goes, oh no, you've got to do something. Like, but with this, it's kind of could be on any range of complicatedness.
Yeah.
It could be dead simple, so you just got to stand next to it and activate an object, to the point where you've got to fucking do a whole rigmarole of stuff to get through it.
Yeah.
It really is that complicated at times. And as always, it's easy when you've got to walk through, but yeah, it's...
It sounds like this issue could be terminal in that the puzzles themselves, which is the core of the game, is just not intuitive and frustrating. Does it shine in any other areas? Are the controls at least functional and allow you to, when you want to do something, you figured out, I've got to do this, that, and the other, allow you to kind of do that without getting in the way? Because sometimes first-person games with perspective and aiming and other things and platforming, like jumping on things, can go very, very wrong very quickly. Or have they managed to avoid that pitfall at least?
Yeah, I mean, it's not great from a functional aspect. I've already said the shooting isn't,
No.
and the combat isn't great technically.
No.
Jumping around is quite stressful. Like trying to traverse things is, as you say, it's in first person, and trying to get.
Don't want to judge it.
Yeah, sometimes it's a little bit difficult. So you find yourself sort of a bit concerned that you'd not judged it right, and the triple jump and trying to do that, and you think, oh, is there enough? Like it's a bit of a concern. I mean, it does enough, but it really is a puzzle game. That's what the premise behind it is, and I think that's why I started getting frustrated with it, because it's like, well, if I can't complete the puzzles myself, it hasn't got any other legs.
No.
Like, this is literally what it's here for. And if it wasn't, and we spoke previously about my ability to drop things if it just ain't doing what I expected. I think to be fair to it, it's the puzzles that got me in there, and it's the puzzles that brought me back. So I was like, I need to complete these puzzles. Like, it's stressing me out. But
what's the gap between stopping, and starting again? Like, was it a week, couple of days?
I think it's a couple of weeks. I was at a point where I was like, I'm cutting my losses here.
Done a biff and been in it.
Yeah, I was like, this is just taking. I just can't figure out the way forward or how to do the puzzles. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to do what I wouldn't normally do. I'm going to check a guide and see if it can get me through it.
Yeah.
But obviously, as you get further into these puzzle games, the puzzles actually tend to get harder.
Yeah,
so
of course.
I found myself pretty much relying on the guide to get me through the rest of the game, which is, in the grand scheme of things, I wasn't that far in.
No.
I was probably at most halfway through,
right?
Possibly even a little bit less than that. Like, I could easily have spent. I did a day and something or other.
Yeah.
I could have spent days and days probably trying to figure this out if I was just doing it myself.
Well, these guides always seem to pop out of these From Software games. All those cheats are using the guides because the game don't communicate, and that's getting Game of the fucking Decade plaudits. It's third coming of gaming after Breath of the Wild. So maybe that's the way forward now. Stump everyone and just force them to use an online guide, and then go, well, look how clever we were. You had to go to the internet to provide it. But I personally am more in your boat, and I find that stuff infuriating. Well, let's start to wind this down. Any other business for Supraland? I mean, it sounds like me even bringing you on here to talk about it is bringing up painful memories. So I don't want to labour it and cause you a stressful evening.
Not really. I mean, I did. There were times when I enjoyed the puzzles, and it is, satisfying when you figure it out and you find chests and things. Like, there are fun elements to it. I didn't hate my time in it. I enjoyed like finding different areas and stuff. I just got a bit frustrated at times when you just want that little bit of extra help, and the game somehow recognising that you're struggling here. So give me a hint or something, like a little hint system or something would have been the way forward, in my view.
Well, Uncharted, what they do is if you're in a puzzle area for a certain amount of time, the character will start hinting and talking, and then eventually you can choose to like look at an object of interest, like this It's based on time. And I think one of the Tomb Raider games allowed you to change or scale that up or down, like the assistance for the puzzles. So you could have loads of assistance or none. But when you're just sort of left with the default and it's almost nothing, you scratching your arse, aren't you?
I was going around trying to talk to all these little. I mean, you call them NPCs; they're largely useless, but it's pretty similar to it's an indie game, so it's not going to have this huge depth of backstory. But trying to just sort of get some sort of a hint, like have I missed something? Have I not registered something? But yeah, I mean, I must say, like, I did enjoy completing the game, even though. Like, there were some elements that I could just complete puzzle-wise myself, but I did find myself continually having to, at some point, go back to the guide and go, right, what have I missed then? Yeah. Because and I just thought, I don't want to keep getting stressed out in the areas because it's just not going to make me want to play it again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a huge amount to add other than I wish there'd have just been some sort of additional hint system there.
Well, maybe they'll take that on board for Supra World, so it's only going to get bigger and better from here. It's gone from a land to a world, so you can look forward to that follow-up as and when Supra Games decide to release it. Let's have a wander up to the doors of the gaming gallery then, because this is where we put all our games that we like to recognise at various different levels at our own discretion. Obviously, you can choose not to induct it into your personal wing and add it to your exhibition within the gallery, but we're outside. Supraland's, it's a bit cold now, so people don't want to be hanging around out here all day. Are we going to be unlocking these doors and giving Supraland some flowers on the way in and dropping it off in your wing somewhere?
I find this one a really difficult one. I mean, whatever I do here at this point is borderline. I'm not going to.
So you keep the doors locked. We're just going to walk down the pub. All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Had you put that in, that would have been controversial, I think, because for the vast majority of this 20-odd minutes, it's been negativity based around the core mechanics that it's a puzzle game, and it's frustrating. But that's sometimes the way the cookie crumbles, those puzzle games. I bet you there's people out there that managed to understand the language or the cues or whatever was there. They just knew how the game was flowing and loved it. But that's the risk you take with puzzle games. They are completely dependent on the consumer or the player being able to understand what you're asking, and if they're not on the same wavelength, you often run into these little issues, and that's why people find them frustrating in like action games or other games that aren't puzzle games. They're like, oh, do a puzzle now, and people get stuck, and they're like, why is this even here? At least with Supraland, I guess that was the game. It was always going to be from the outset, but it just didn't connect.
It's the same with this bloody game of enemies. Why are they here?
Wow.
Like, the enemies, the combat in it is so dumb and pointless that it just becomes an additional irritant that you have to deal with whilst you're trying to figure out a fucking puzzle.
Yeah.
It would have been much better if it had just didn't need them, but it's because they wanted this upgrade mechanic in there for weapons. They had to give a purpose for the weapons and stuff. So they have to then put these pointless enemies in. To be fair to it, I don't think it reviewed badly. But from my perspective, if I have to use a guide to get through the large proportion of the rest of the game, and the puzzles aren't, giving me any kind of hint, then
it's tricky to recommend it or to put it.
It's tricky to recommend it.
It's tricky to recognise it in your own gallery, your own exhibition. So yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. Supraland doesn't go into the gaming gallery; it'll be forever. Actually, not true. It won't be forever shunned because someone else could come along and say, "Oh no, I played that and I'll dump it in my gallery." But it will never appear in Logan's wing of the gallery if you go and wander around. Supraland will not rear its ugly, well, that's maybe a bit harsh, its little face, its little red world and blue king face. Anyway, that will conclude this edition of Idle Game Chat. Nothing more for us to say here other than thanks for your time and ta-da.
This was a Dimp Digital production.